All right, let's talk about something that gets a ton of drone pilots in trouble. It's this super common, kind of dangerous myth. This idea that if you're flying low, you're flying legal. Well, we're about to see why altitude, it really doesn't matter the way you think it does.
Okay, so picture this. You're out on a job, maybe just having some fun with your drone. You're keeping it nice and low, way below that 400-foot ceiling, just skimming the treetops. You're not bothering anybody. There are no big airports in sight, so you're totally safe, right? Completely legal. Or are you?
Here's the thing, and this is the core idea for this whole explainer. Flying low doesn't mean flying legal. I know, it feels like it should, right? It's intuitive, but it's also fundamentally wrong. And honestly, understanding why is absolutely critical for every single one of us flying a drone.
So yeah, let's dive into what we're calling the dangerous drone myth. And we call it that for a good reason. Because if you're only relying on your altitude to keep you legal, well, you're setting yourself up for a really bad day, and maybe even an unwelcome call from the FAA.
And look, I get it. It totally makes sense on the surface, doesn't it? You think, hey, the big airplanes are way up there, so if I'm way down here, I must be in some kind of free-for-all zone. But that's a huge, huge misunderstanding of how our sky is actually laid out. It's not about high versus low. It's all about these invisible boundaries that, and this is key, can go all the way to the ground.
So to get the rules right, you've got to learn to see this invisible map in the sky. It's called the National Airspace System, or NAS for short. And you can think of it like the rule book for the sky. It governs literally everything that flies, from a massive jumbo jet right down to your DJI.
Okay, at the very top level, the NAS gets split into two giant buckets, regulatory and non-regulatory. You can just think of that as the first big decision point. But for what we do as drone pilots, we need to get a little more granular to make it useful.
All right, this is where the rubber meets the road. For like 99% of your flights, this is the single most important question you can ask. Is the air I'm about to fly in controlled or uncontrolled? Because the answer to that question changes everything.
And here it is. This is the big one. If you forget everything else, remember this. It's the airspace classification, not your altitude, that determines if you need permission to fly. It's the what, not the how high. The letter on the map, not the number on your controller. That's the whole ballgame.
Okay, let's kick things off with the easy one, Class G airspace, G for Golf. This is uncontrolled airspace. You can basically think of it as the default setting for the sky. It's everywhere that isn't specifically marked as something else. If you're flying out in the country, this is probably where you are. And the best part? No ATC authorization needed. You're good to go.
All right, next up is Class E, or Echo. Now hold on, I know what you're thinking. The chart says controlled, and that sounds a little scary. But for us drone pilots, it's usually not a big deal. See, Class E typically starts way above us, at either 700 or 1,200 feet off the ground. Since we're capped at 400 feet, we're almost always flying underneath it. So even though it's technically controlled airspace up there, down where we are, we don't need authorization.
Okay, pay attention, because this is where that dangerous myth gets completely busted. We're talking Class D airspace. D for Delta. You find this around smaller airports that have a control tower. And here's the kicker. It extends from the surface up, from the grass all the way up to 2,500 feet. That means the second your drone's props spin up, you're in controlled airspace. Flying at 50 feet? Doesn't matter. ATC authorization is required. Period. Now let's step it up a notch to Class C, or Charlie. You'll find this around even busier airports. Imagine a two-tiered cake. The inner ring goes about 5 miles out and starts right at the surface. Then there's a bigger, higher shelf that goes out to 10 miles. The rule? Super simple. If you're inside any part of that shape, you need authorization. It's not a question.
And now, the big boss, Class B airspace. B for Bravo. This is the serious stuff. It's the airspace protecting the busiest airports in the country. We're talking about places like JFK, Atlanta, O'Hare. They call it the upside-down wedding cake because it's got all these complex layers that get wider the higher you go. And the rule here is absolute, no exceptions. ATC authorization is required. This is the most restrictive airspace you will ever deal with.
So, okay, we've got the basic building blocks down, the different classes of airspace. But wait, there's more. You've also got to be aware of another layer of stuff on the map. We're talking about special use airspace and a few other zones you really don't want to mess with.
Think of this as your do not fly here checklist. You've got prohibited areas, like over the White House. The name says it all. Stay out. No excuses. Then you have restricted areas.
That could mean they're doing live fire testing or something else dangerous in there. Not a good place for a drone. And you've got MOAs, military operations areas. That's where fighter jets could be practicing low-level maneuvers. Blundering into one of those, yeah, that could be catastrophic.
And then you have the pop-up threats, things that aren't always on the map permanently. The biggest one you need to worry about is a TFR, a temporary flight restriction. These can pop up for anything, a wildfire, a big football game, a presidential visit. And let me be crystal clear, busting a TFR is probably the single fastest way to lose your drone license.
So with all this stuff to worry about, how in the world do you keep track of it? It's actually really simple, and it is absolutely non-negotiable. Before every single flight, you check your charts and you check your NOTAMs. That stands for Notices to Air Missions. That's your pre-flight homework. It'll tell you exactly what kind of invisible sky you're flying in and warn you about any pop-up restrictions. Okay, enough with the theory. Let's make this real. We're going to walk through a classic scenario that shows exactly why this whole altitude doesn't matter thing is so incredibly important.
So here's the job. You're a commercial pilot and you've got a straightforward gig, a simple roof inspection. Now the building is kind of close to a smaller airport, one with a control tower, so you know that's Class D airspace. Your plan seems solid. You're just going to fly nice and low, maybe 150, 200 feet max, get the shots, stay out of everyone's way, easy peasy, right?
So let's pause right there. Based on everything we've just talked about, you're flying low. You're just doing a quick roof job, but on the map, you are clearly inside the lines for that Class D airport. So the question is this flight legal without getting authorization first?
And the answer is a big fat no. Absolutely not. It doesn't matter if you're flying at 200 feet, 100 feet, or even 10 feet off the roof. The moment you cross that invisible line on the map, you entered Class D airspace. And what did we learn about Class D? It's controlled all the way down to the ground.
And that right there is the perfect example of what we've been talking about this whole time. Your low altitude was completely irrelevant. It meant nothing. What mattered was that invisible line on the chart. That airspace class is what drives the rules. That and only that is why you needed to get authorization.
So I want to leave you with this one final thought. The next time you're out there getting ready to launch, what's going to be your first check? Are you just thinking about staying under 400 feet? Are you going to pull out that map and find out whose sky you're actually about to fly in? Because honestly, your safety, your license, and the safety of everyone else up there, it all depends on you checking the map, not just the altimeter.